you for keeping me on task. Rightio, so this was, again, we were continuing in that same chat or thread, and maybe we were trying out some of these different prompts. We tried out that one there with what open questions remain, and then we found this cool, interesting idea, and we wanted it to go into more detail or depth and propose based on that idea some novel experimental tools or methods. And it did that, so that's great. And I'm working collaboratively with the model at this point, but still I'm guiding or leaning it into certain areas to explore certain things in depth, or not to ignore, right? Again, working with these AI, you get those interaction fluents. Everyone has their own interaction fluent and knowledge or background knowledge, which means that your dove can pick up things that I don't pick up, or things that are actually interesting or a big contribution in that field. Me as an outsider from the agricultural sort of resource economic space, maybe I missed that one, or I see something else that's interesting from more of a behavioural or complexity science lens. Again, my own interaction fluent can help me sort of spark creativity as well. But of course, yes, over-reliance on these on AI for ideas at least, maybe dampens your critical thinking or originality. Use it as an inspiration, not as a gospel, in that sense. Now, concept mapping and topic exploration, you might be thinking about drawing connections between topics or themes in the different papers. Maybe you want to group the papers into similar sort of areas or clusters. A technical approach is to embed the papers or paragraphs into some sort of vector space in fine clusters based on some sort of dimensionality reduction, like PCA or something like that. That's the technical approach, and that is certainly possible. I'll show you that in the next slide. Maybe an easier way, just ask the model, create a concept map or graph or table showing how these things relate. Maybe you want to give it a bit of guidance there. Clusters equal subtopics, links equals shared ideas or similar ideas. But yeah, again, this might help you sort of discover different links that you might have not seen otherwise. Again, language models, lots of parameters, 90, some of them getting up to billions, 92 billion parameters for the larger best-in-class models. They have a very large knowledge space, probably bigger than we'll ever have access to. So links, drawing them, semantic links and things like that, they're very capable at pulling those out. Again, you've got to go back and fact check, and maybe you as the human don't actually see them as that novel, but that's where your interaction fluent comes in really handy, right? Technical approach of that embedding and putting it into different spaces. The figure 2 there sort of gives you a bit of an idea about that. Again, we've taken like 4,052 dimensions, and then we've tried to map similarity in 2 dimensions. We've probably lost a bit of granularity. What does it really mean, X and Y? But you can see that you have groupings between these journals. These are 3 journals, top journals from economics. It was American Economic Review, QJE, JPE. So there's 3 clusters there showing those 3 different literatures and showing how the papers within those literatures are clustered together semantically similar, right? So showing different, those journals are focused on different topics or semantic spaces, right? An extreme example of this sort of network construction, or graph RAG, if you want to call it that, deep context networks, and again, that GitHub, you can actually extract graph-based information from papers themselves, right? If I jumped over to this graph RAG prompt, I feed in a paper and I ask it to identify, all the entities, the names, the entity type, the entity descriptions. From the entities, identify all pairs where they relate to each other. So what you're doing here is getting it to output basically the basis of like a graph, like a network, right? We've done something similar on a bit of a smaller scale as a proof of concept, using 15,000 plus articles from these 3 journals and 177,000 plus citing policy documents. I don't actually show here the policy citations, but the idea was that we wanted to see the diversity of thoughts between different journals, how they relate to each other, and then how does the diversity of thought in papers or journals lead to policy cites or things like that. Impact, right? Impact measures. We could look at over time the diversity of thoughts between those 3 journals, how they relate to each other and semantically similar or not, or the diversity of the content within those papers of those journals. Over time, also creating these really cool graph networks with links between, for each document, the author of the documents, the affiliations of those authors, the source titles. The graph RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, basically helps models, large language models, to sort of refine their context or their search of these different papers using similar authors, similar papers, similar journals, things like that. Just improves the performance of the language models for a domain task, this one being literature search. So we show, yes, context citation networks, nodes, research policy documents, citations between those 2 types of documents. The interactive mode, I won't go into that today. It shows how you can sort of like highlight or not these different paper, author, institution dynamics. And what this one doesn't include is semantic links or edges between the papers based on semantic similarity. Now, if we went to that extent, you can then start to actually look between paper to paper level, maybe using cosine similarity between the embedding pairs. We can actually look at like semantic closeness between the papers. We establish an edge based on some threshold, maybe 80% similarity, 95% similarity, depending on desired sparsity. And again, that says, okay, I choose this paper and I look at the that paper node and I can see all the semantic links. Okay, these papers are similar in that sense. Graph RAG takes that, okay, search for the paper that I care about, okay, and then pull out the related papers, semantically similar related papers based on the edges. And then I bring all that into the context of the model and then shoot it through the language model and then use that context to respond. Again, I'm just like narrowing or constraining the knowledge space, the larger knowledge space of the model to respond in ways that I want it to. And yeah, you can do different cool things if you want to with the graphs, depending on what your research questions. Oh, cheers. Yeah. Okay. Now, again, we've gone through. We've had searching literature, summarizing it, identifying gaps, concept mapping, topic exploration. We've done some sort of maybe we want to go technical with the topic mapping or graph representations here. Yeah, that's cool. But now we want to actually start designing surveys and experiments. And I sort of hinted at that a little bit earlier. I said, okay, here's my papers. You've summarized them. I thought this was a really neat, interesting idea. Now give me more depth or information on that and suggest some experimental methods to address that question. Okay, so I'm starting to get into that space now. Again, you've got some more questions you can go on. I know in particular, like Benno Torgler, the director of the ARC Beta Center and my supervisor as well. He's been doing quite a bit recently around, here's my classic economic experiment, suggest 10 different variations, almost getting to the point where, like, what am I doing in this case? Like, these things are so novel, these settings and experimental conditions, like, what's the, you have a bit of a crisis moment almost. Sorry, Benno, to call you out there, but I had it too as well. Like, I was good at summarizing literature, writing code. Now this thing can do it 10 times faster. What's the purpose of me? But you sometimes will have those moments. But the point of what I was saying there is that even to a really trained, really experienced experimental economist, the models, with his interaction fluent with the models, he's able to generate these really creative ideas for new experimental treatments, conditions, settings, so on. And in practice, you can use, whatever platform you're using to brainstorm different outcomes or identify, what data or how you'd get that data. And again, I did that prompt before, so I won't go back. Now, I've got those experiments and those surveys. Maybe I want to critique and pre-test those ideas before I go out and implement them. I want to act as a bit of a reviewer and say, what would you 3 tough questions you've asked. I'm going to try and refine this idea before I go into it and commit too much resources. Maybe I want to act as a thesis committee or reviewer for the students in the room, posing tough questions, identifying weaknesses in your method or your experiment, so on. Maybe I want to test the wording, play a bit of a devil's advocate. For a very low reading grade level, how would you interpret this question that I've asked you, and using that to help you sort of work with the model or not work with yourself, to refine the settings as well. So again, we're sort of getting to the point of just about to run this survey experiment. I just want to refine it first, make sure I got everything right before I push it out. It's really expensive to go back to 1,000 people on MTurk or something like that. Let's get this right the first time. Another use case, maybe catching errors or flaws again. Now, I alluded a little bit to synthetic data generation using AI-based simulation studies. Kind of owing to, again, the human corpus of the internet. The models have picked up biases or characteristics of humans embedded in human text, human data, right? They're trained on human data. So maybe they have picked up, in that sense, some sort of digital reflection or proxies for human cognition, decision making. So cool, let's use that to generate synthetic data. It's scalable, it's cost-effective experimentation in that sense. And you're bridging, in that sense, a couple different domains, maybe social sciences, industry applications with AI. Now, there is a bit of calibration to do, right? You would have maybe heard some reports where these models tend to respond from a general basis, or give you the average of a population. Maybe it's the average population that model was trained on, the training data, right? It's Reddit, or it's Facebook. What are the characteristics of those people that have been picked up? So yeah, while we can mirror these broad patterns, you can also calibrate them and provide them context about your people, your target audience, or so on, to sort of, again, narrow, constrain the knowledge space to act as if, role play. They're really good at role playing, really good, owing to the way they were trained, right? Assistant fine-tuning, instruction fine-tuning, role playing. Again, maybe they're typically speaking sort of not so much giving a sort of misportrayal or flattening, right? Losing out some sort of identities or particular groups and diversity, maybe reinforcing stereotypes. Again, calibration is a really important idea here to get around that. And these are things that just to keep in mind, right? In general, there are solutions to them, just to keep in mind more than anything. Okay, so I've run my experiment. I've generated some synthetic data with my synthetic participants. And now I want to analyze that data. We're going through the full pipeline today. So programming data analysis, again, Claude's really good. GitHub Copilot there, it's okay. GPT is okay as well. But maybe again working with these assistants to generate code snippets or entire functions or scripts on the fly. They're really good at that first pass. Again, my Python level versus ChatGPT Python level, I probably get better code. I can generate better code, but they can do it way quicker. automates that sort of like boilerplate code, which I can then go verify, check, and then improve upon as well. So it's really useful in that first pass. Maybe debugging certain errors or fixes. I got this error. Please help me fix it. And it's useful for both non-experts and experts in that sense, which I sort of alluded to. Some examples here, those prompts. I'm going to skip this demo just because we're running out of time, but up on the GitHub repo, I've put in this data set. It's online. You can have a go at literally uploading that CSV file and asking it to generate a graph or write a function to run this linear regression on the data. Go try it yourself. I'm sure it'll work. If not, come get me and I'll help you work your way around it. But again, guarding against your blind acceptance, AI can produce very plausible, convincing code, but can ultimately be incorrect, and it can be really messy, particularly when you're like doing like web development or something like that. I was trying to do full stack development and working with a model on creating a really complex software architecture. The model got lost a little bit sometimes, and then these errors propagated through the system. That's a full stack online app or web page, right? It's a little bit different from a script to analyze XYZ data or pre-process or clean XYZ data, but it is just a note to say guarding against that blind acceptance and breaking your code into smaller segments and test as you go, right? Statistical analysis, interpretation. This one, be a little bit careful with this, right? I could feed in the results table, right? All the p-values and whatnot from my regression. I ask it to identify some interesting findings from that. It'll get 2 or 3, 4, 5 probably correct. It'll probably also hallucinate 2, 3, or 4. So again, fact checking. Go look at it. Look at it for yourself. Maybe you want it to use it more for explaining. What does the R value imply here, or what does the P? Again, you're narrowing the response. You're constraining the knowledge space and its response to you. Helping sort of guide it in a sense to what you actually want to do. So I say, here's the table, tell me what's interesting, versus here's the table, tell me what's interesting from an R, your p-value perspective, or what's interesting in the interactions versus the interaction effects versus the direct effects, right? And then working with these to maybe spot some correlations or patterns and things like that. Again, just be a little bit careful here, always cross-check. Treat it as a second pair of eyes, not an oracle. Now drafting and writing. So we've got our data, we've analysed it, now we want to write about it. So using AI, drafting assistant, yes, I'm sure we've probably all done that. Maybe help you overcome some sort of writer's block or rephrasing, things like that. They're very, very good, very, very capable at this. What I'll typically do if I'm, say, like trying to generate like a research or finding section, I've generated my own dot points. I pop them in the little squiggly brackets there and help me rewrite this into a concise results paragraph in an academic tone because I'm writing an academic paper. So again, I'm guiding the model with my context, my knowledge, my dot points. If I let it run free on my table, here's my table, rewrite that into, give me a paragraph. It might hallucinate some aspects. I'm helping to narrow and guide the response. Here's the table, here's my dot points. Give me the paragraph. Sharpen logic, yep, does my conclusion follow from these results? Is my reasoning clear? Have I explained it correctly, right? I'm just going to start to go a bit more quicker through these ones. And moving to different sections, right? You can go have a look at the GitHub repo again and got all these slides plus all the prompt examples I've shown today. And let's take some inspiration from students again. What's the interaction styles? Again, direct problem solving, are we doing direct output, are we more collaborative? So I'd like to sort of see most people sort of leaning towards the blues there, if possible. right? And translating that over to your Bloom taxonomy, again, that's, you know, those higher levels of reasoning, right? Rather than just these, give me what is this, and blind acceptance. So another, again, really interesting report from Anthropic there that I'd encourage you to go check out. Other applications across the academic system. So we've now gone through and we've written the whole paper, maybe with some help. And now we want to think about like lecturers or teachers, or maybe admin or admissions office. I know the University of Alberta in Canada we're really going heavy on this automated admissions office. I gave them some recommendations on what they should be looking out for, because it's getting into a very iffy, you know, area. Automated acceptance or not of certain people, and automated translations of CVs and transcripts from other languages into English, like really scary stuff, but it's possible. And what I'd just be saying here is just you really got to you test and do go through these exercises of validating the models in that sense. You don't want to just let these things run free, particularly when you have such a big impact on someone's life, as in admissions, right? But maybe it just helps you think about some other areas, and the paper there, you can go check it out as well. Yes, we're going to go very quickly through these last ones. We've got 2 minutes. So risk opportunities, I think there's only like 3 slides here anyway. Yeah, that's good. Okay, cool. Easy. My timer told me 2, but that's good. 5. Go check out this paper, a really good one. Missouri and Crockett 2024. They're talking about these different risks of AI in research or academia. I think the illusion of understanding, I'll show some figures on the next page, explanatory depth, you know, potential for monocultures or narrowing of diversity. You know, if we're all just using AI and we're not relying on any interaction fluence, or we're not bringing in some of these more complex prompts, we only stopped at the simple prompt, we're probably maybe moving into very similar areas or spaces, that conversation, right? So a couple of things to just keep your mind on or aware of, and again, really good paper. Now the illustrations I think are even better. I think, you know, again, picture says 1,000 words. Up the top there, you know, I believe I have this understanding, this really in-depth understanding, but my actual understanding is XYZ, overconfidence in that sense. I think all hypotheses are what the AI tells me, but actually there's this whole universe outside of it, right? Or objectivity, right? Like we have these AI standpoints or individuals, groups, you know, like more Western cultures or whatever, that AI has taken that standpoint. That's all the standpoints, but actually we've got we've got a whole bunch outside of that as well. So go check out the paper, go into much more depth. Just wanted to show these really good images, I thought. And sort of just moving towards the back end, again, one slide probably doesn't do it justice, but data privacy, a big one. We had a bit of a chat today, particularly about synthetic data generation. Just being careful with, say you've run a survey, and in your ethics application, you had only talked about having aggregated reports or results, right? So if I'm going to then think about mapping one-to-one, here's my survey results, and using that to create some agents, one-to-one matching, probably a bit of a no-no from the ethics standpoint. So I probably got to aggregate the results first and create like subpopulation representative models, okay, rather than the direct one-to-one mappings. Otherwise, you know, removing PII addresses, contact details, just like you would with any other sort of research project. But just need to be even more mindful with the names and things like that when you're passing over a cloud. Now, I haven't even talked about local models, which is a whole other thing. Like you know, again, cloud-based or APIs or the chat GPTs over the web. I can also have local models on my laptop, for example, small language models. maybe there are only 7 to 9 billion parameters. I load that on via OLLAMA, and I for my sensitive tasks, I just use my local model. It stays on my computer. Data doesn't even go over the web, right? That's another alternative that you can have a look at. OLLAMA, OLLAMA, is a really good package to do that if you want to have a look into that. Integrity, yes. So disclosure, plagiarism. Please disclose. Just be transparent about it at the very least. Don't present AI work as your own, obviously, and citation integrity. AI, particularly like GPTs, not the illicits or so on. They're a lot better with the citations, but there have been reports of citations which don't exist, legal cases which don't exist. So go check it. Don't just cite it as well. We're taking it as at face value. Reproducibility, is that a new thing in the AI? Does it just, or is it that reproducibility crisis like existing already regardless? Maybe it just explodes it or amplifies it a little bit more. Dependence, you still got to use your own skills, your own brain, your own thinking, critical skills and thinking. So what if it's unavailable or gives a wrong answer? You need to know how to proceed without it as well, and or rely on the expertise of your colleagues, your supervisors and so on. As well, oversight, yes, and continual learning. The AI models change every week. The landscape is just crazy. Even just generating these slides like a couple of weeks ago, updating things still all the time. So it's hard to keep a track of, but there are like those TLDR, too long don't read, sort of AI newsletters and things like that, which you can use to help you keep a track if you like. Tech Read was one, or Hacker News is another one. Stay critical. Again, this just shows you, I just want to include this last little graph, conversation tree idea. So, I go back, edit the response, or use little arrows to go forward and back. Down here, I show you, edit my message that I'm going to send to the AI. Okay, I want to change my wording. It responded in a silly way. I go back, edit the message. Okay, that's a new tree, new part of the tree up here. I ask the model to regenerate, and I get the arrows below the model's response, a new part of the tree, and I can go back and forth however I like. This particular plugin here helps you visualize that. I haven't actually tested it, but I generally just try and keep a track of the tree in my head, which can get hard, but this is a way to visualize that if you like as well. Future outlook, again, the Missouri Crockett paper refers to this Oracle surrogate quantum arbiter. Go check out that paper. Again, you may be getting to this point where you're seeing AI as colleagues or so on. But human researchers obviously need to still supervise, provide your own interaction fluent, your direction, right? But maybe much more of the grunt work, if you will, could be offloaded. But Koronek also talks a little about these different areas of application for these models, for economics in particular. So it's a good paper in that sense, to very early on in this current revolution, AI revolution. Koronek pushed this out, but he also talks a little bit about the risks in that sense too, which I encourage you to go check out. Really future concepts that we're working on as part of our synthetic data generation work, more of a digital behavioral twin, right? Like you heard digital twins, behavioral twins in that sense. The calibration of agents to role play this person, that person, this population becomes really important and difficult. But look, while somewhat speculative, you are seeing some really cool, even industry applications. There's one called like what was it? Italy LM or something like that, something silly like that. They've taken, they've created these representative model or agents to represent Italy or citizens, the constituents of Italy, based on some long-standing survey data and things like that. What they're doing with that is, you can use those agents, take those digital agents, maybe instead of going to the 100 human participants, we go to the 100 AI-based behavioral twins and and we can ask them a bunch of different downrange questions. So the ones that they didn't actually get asked in the first place, I forgot something, I ask them the different questions, or I take them into a different, completely new domain. Maybe I'm testing political messaging to certain constituents. That's where it gets really scary, Cambridge Analytica sort of style stuff. But moving towards that state, I went a little bit over time, but actually I did all right, I think, maybe. Thank you very much. We've got about 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes for questions. Thank you very much for holding with me there. Now, welcome to get in touch as well. That's my email up there. Whether or not you want to talk about the, the SurveyLM synthetic data generation stuff, or just have, other ideas or questions or whatnot, or didn't get the GitHub repo link or whatnot, feel free to get in touch.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So we have some time for questions. We can go first with you because I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Do you go this one?
When Steve mentioned about the ARE-UWA, he mentioned about the literature review and cite like 50 pages per citation there. So I just want to ask, is it just about the information they say about the reason, the information in a table? Because in ChatGPT, sometimes we can't just directly.
So we're just going to jump back over to a list. If I've understood the question, so the question is the what's included in this?
Everything included here. So may I just them more, like we need to check them every single paper again? What happened?
Always. I mean, you can have how do we say it? No blind acceptance. You can adjust what you are returning in this table, right, by modifying my prompt that I'm sending in. Pretty as simple as that. I took a very simple, just a question-based prompt. I could have equally have defined, give me a structured table to summarize or overview the summary. Ultimately, I still got to go check those papers. I can't be. I have to, if I'm going to put this or any version of this into my own paper or my own result, my own reports or whatever, I, as the author, as the human, need to go verify these papers. At the same time, you might, as you're going through, you might find different parts that might not have been covered in this table that you care about when you're reading through the paper as well. The information in them, like, study contexts, platform, these things, they're going to be fairly, this sort of level of information is going to be fairly, I'd expect that it's fairly accurate. I still go check that though, because I don't know unless I go check.
Given that we are in a list, there's a question online from Amberlin. So the question is, does Elicit have access to papers that sit behind paywalls on research database?
I don't know. That's a very good question. I don't know.
I know the answer to that.
It
It doesn't.
doesn't?
It doesn't. And the problem with that is
awesome.
It exacerbates open access papers, which are of a different quality papers that are not access, or maybe a different research access paper. And the problem with that is that it might exacerbate a certain bias over it.
Very fair. Is that the same, do you know, with Perplexity? Or again, I haven't. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Same one. Now.
Has never given me.
Yeah. So with that, again, so the question was, does it have open access, or is it just does it have the papers behind the paywall? We had an answer from the audience because I didn't actually look into that. And again, I'm generally what I'm doing is just trying to find like words. Like I'm just trying to learn the language of that particular literature, and that's what I'm using this for. And I might even use those results. What I was trying to show with the copy and pasting is how how I'll go and do this, maybe an initial search on here, or maybe I work with a tool to get the keywords that I need for that literature, and I'll go do my own searches as well. And then and then I'll, the idea of copy and pasting the paper from here was just to show how you can bring in different contexts to try and work with the model and constrain the model space to that paper, for example. But thank you.
Yeah, and it's not a criticism.
Yeah.
The thing about
No.
spaces
Yeah.
is they move so fast.
Yeah.
But as soon as some person like me who's been on the platform for 5 minutes puts his hand up and says, "Oh, I found this thing that's wrong," someone will fix it next week.
Yeah.
And it's moving so quickly that you know, it's kind of pointless pointing out stickly things like that.
No, it's very fair.
More important is mitigating these sorts of movements towards rather than picking apart those kind of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get you, and I really liked the Missouri and Crockett paper because of that. They sort of get into these parts about, and again, you know, you think about like sovereign models, like China has been developing their, you know, a national model. The US is doing the same from I think OpenAI teamed up with the DoD, Department of Defense, and creating this new intelligence model for the US use. Australia is doing something similar as well, from what I've heard. And again, you're creating these like sovereign models that are relevant to that content, but you're purposely choosing what knowledge to include. Now, OpenAI has access to this data, Meta has access to this data, Claude has access to this data sets. What's the meaning of me interacting with only one of these systems or the other? Will I eventually bias myself into this knowledge space or this one over here? Very important questions and really fair points. So yeah, no criticism at all. Again, encourage you to go check out that Missouri paper in particular. Semantic Scholar AI, I'm not sure if they have, I know some models or some platforms, some platforms will be striking up these deals. I know OpenAI has been doing a bunch of these licensing deals across, you know, maybe newspapers, or maybe they're going with particular publishers. Again, what does that mean if I'm only getting you know, this publisher or that publisher, like MDPI or whatever, on my knowledge base? Important to think about. And again, use them as a partner, not a blind acceptance. When you talk about having, say, I've got access to APIs for paywall, papers behind paywalls, I could go ahead and construct my own knowledge base like we did with the big graph neural net. We had to get approval for that, right? But again, you know, I've brought in these papers that have sat there, and then creating this own one. That's not very useful for the person that's not a programmer, but it is possible. I had a question there as well.
Yeah, we have got up first, and you.
Oh,
okay.
So I think generally these find the people possible if specific officers like that paper.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit of the question for the people online?
Yes. Okay. Sorry, can I get you to
Okay, so one thing, as Mary said, these are biased towards easily accessible papers.
Yep.
But we can.
Okay. Yes. Sorry. Can we get can we train models or steer models to certain publishers or
for those with our university, they have access to.
Wow. I've never tried that, but that's a great. Give it a go. So feed in again. You could feed in squiggly brackets. Here's the publishers that my university has access to. Here's my question. Here's a couple of papers I've returned from my initial search. Please identify some papers. Again, Google Scholar. So paper titles and abstracts. That's all fair game for every model, and they have access to open source and to paywall, at least the titles and the abstracts, right? So yes, certainly go ask it to interact with Google Scholar or something like that, or find, you know, again, working with these squiggly brackets. I have no idea what they're called, but working with them to sort of constrain how the model should respond or lead it into certain ways of responding. Again, here's the journals or the publishers my university has access to. Here's my research question. Please find relevant papers using e.g. Google Scholar based on their abstracts and titles. The more specific you get with this model or the prompts, the more specific, like I think it's a bit off topic, but there's a bit of a joke like in the field of AI where we've been designing these models to sort of respond as like Spock or like basically like an autistic person. So that's good for autistics using the platforms in the sense that you have this, you think about that double empathy problem. So I interact very well with these models based on how I talk. I'm very direct. I give lots of context and meaning. Okay, so context, meaning, extending that, being really detailed and guiding it, rather than just saying, write me a blog post. Okay, so context, give it context, sort of thing.
Yeah. So I've got just a question. A couple of times you said that there's some selection bias, for instance, with Meta, the type of people who use Meta. What kind of disturbs me about when I think about that is it's not really only the people who use Meta that I'd be sort of identifying as selection bias there with. It's really how people behave when they're using Meta. So So there's a selection bias with how the data is collected, what's the environment, what behaviors and emotions we're kind of exhibiting when that data is being collected. And then there's, of course, like all the obvious issues with selection bias. So that also kind of sort of brings up this other issue with the way I think a lot of people think about AI is it's a tool, but if you use a tool every day, like it's not just like this thing that's independent from you, I guess, code with it, and that's happening. So like where does that, this is a bit more of a philosophical question, but like where does that lead? And if you have a hunch, like I know you're providing so many of these things that give us great tools to use it in like a mindful way where our critical thinking doesn't atrophy. But if I put it in, I guess, the economic frame, like is the Nash equilibrium for AI adoption like highly divergent from the Pareto optimum? Like basically is just like the sort of incentive that it dangles in front of you just gonna basically erode all the things that like made it useful as a tool in the first place.
So we were talking a bit about like the bias. So we start off Meta. Again, I've talked a couple of times about like selection bias, like the people. So Meta, Facebook, Instagram. So yes, you have the selection bias of like the people represented in those models from that data. Again, Meta, that was a bit of an oversimplification. They've done a lot of work to go to other data sources to prevent this, but it's a very fair point. If you're using Facebook, Instagram, Reddit data, interaction data from the web, you might be picking up those behaviors as well, like the way we interact on those platforms. So maybe you have a bit more of a casual response or characteristics of casualness in the model, the way it responds and talks to you versus like a more formal setting from an academic data set. The characteristics that the model picks up from the academic data set, right? So diversity of training data is a big focus in that field as well. We were moving into this idea. We've had a couple of different ideas presented around like critical, or I've been harping on about like critical use of these tools and not taking things at face value, not being mindful to not erode your own abilities. But the temptation you were saying to use these models maybe every day, I'm almost becoming like inseparable from ChatGPT or whatever.
And also, sorry to
no, that's good.
What is the basis for the reality that you're kind of holding the AI to? when you're so dependent on it as well for kind of, creating your sort of own understanding of the world. Like, is there really like a separate thing where you can like hold it to some standard?
Yeah, we're starting to get, that I'm struggling a little bit with that one, sorry, but again, I know Missouri Crockett, they do talk about in length about these sort of like shifts of, you have this population of people using, say, ChatGPT, OpenAI sort of models or Claude, and you have almost these different factions and knowledge sets. If you want to go back to the image, actually, that's a good way to do it. There we go. All right, we might have these like different circles for different models. So impacting the, if you look at B there, for example, or C, B or C, providers will have these different circles in that sense. And if I'm only using one model or multiple models or things like that, maybe I'm gravitating also to that. Don't really have an answer for you, if I'm honest. It's an open question. It's a very important question around, where are we leading these people in general, like maybe thinking about like populations of people. Where maybe it's similar in that sense to like a social, social media users and how you've had that sort of like polarization, or you have these like little factions of based on like the AI, very like ML based recommendations for like news articles or things like that. Like there'll be literature there. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And then people will probably saying it's going to connect us and do all these great things, which it does. And
yeah.
It could also do. And it's like kind of what's
yeah.
the equivalent for AI when it's even like it's more inscrutable than social media and how we use it.
Yeah, and the recommendation. Yeah.
Impregnate our own epistemologies. Like we even have the tools to ask what the effect of that is.
I don't think so. Yeah. Very, very interesting though. Yeah. No, it's okay. Slide design, yeah. You can do that all in most of the platforms, like any of the ones that are offering text to image. Whether or not you like asking it to generate like slide outlines, or you can also ask it to like just generate like a template or whatever. Give me an image of a slide that looks, to present this information. Otherwise, there are specific tools like, who was it? Literally, it's just a Google search, like Gen AI slide generator. I can't think off the top of my head. I know it starts with an A. Image. They do a lot around images. I'll have to search. I'll get back to you on that one. What particular one I was talking about there, but search up literally slide generators or Gen AI slide generators. Usually provide it some sort of prompt, and then it'll generate some first pass slides, things like that. It's really annoying me. I can't remember what the name of that software is, but I'll get back to you.
Okay, we have time for one last question.
One last.
Okay, there's one online. This is mine.
Oh.
Are there any journals publishers that require a statement from the authors on the use of AI in the development and investigation, analysis of data, and/or the writing of the manuscript?
Is there journals that require you to do that? Yes. A lot of journals are coming out with like, you need to have these disclosure statements. Some of them are going to be like optional. Again, just do it. I'll be, I'll be very, I'll say, AI models, I'll give the model numbers or specific model instances like GPT-4o from the period of XYZ, March this year to that year. I was interacting with the models or I use models to help me refine, edit, critique my, specific sections. I'll be quite specific in what I've done. I use it for data analysis to generate the code. Right at the end, though, always include my sentence. I, as the human, I, as the author of the paper, have reviewed everything in full detail. I have full accountability and over the knowledge presented in this paper and the way it's run. I've pulled everything together basically, composed and compiled it and done that final check and review, and I'm satisfied as the human in that sense. Yes, you're going to get more and more. I'm sure publishers to ask. I'm sure most universities, if not all, will have adopted. Most schools, if not all, will ask you to do these statements. Unfortunately, can be quite hard sometimes to spot whether or not AI-generated text has been included in a paper. There are AI detectors, but they're not very good most of the time. A lot of false positives. There are some telltale signs sometimes, like someone leaves in as a language model and then XYZ response, these standard little parts that AI always add to the messages. So there are telltales, but generally not like 100%. So you are sort of relying a bit on you to do that for yourself and be transparent. It's still quite important, eh? Anyway, yes.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's it.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much. We are on time. This has been a good workshop. We have had more than 110 people listening to your wisdom.
Wow.
So that's a large number. Thank you very much for coming, and let's thank Steve once again.
Thank you.